Hello everyone, happy Tuesday. Welcome to Archetype, sponsored by Lenovo and AMD. I am your host Ashley, and today we are starting a new character. Hello Mitra from Facebook. Say hi in the chat if you're there. I always like saying hi to everybody. So last week we wrapped up our last character and we're going to start a new character today, which means we get to draw. I already kind of had an idea and designed some stuff out, but we're going to still play with it. Ariel's art, hello. Hello, column, hello. But yeah, so I kind of explained it last stream, but if you guys weren't here for the last one, I started a D&D campaign with some friends, and I love all the classes and stuff that you get to be in D&D. I think it's really fun and cool, and so I'm going to take that idea, and we're going to make some characters based off of our D&D archetypes that we have for a game. And whenever I'm part of a campaign, I like to do some fun stuff where I'll design everybody's characters and then 3D print them. So we have custom little tabletop minis for everybody. So it's always really fun. So I'm going to start with my character, which is a druid type character. But our campaign is also set in kind of like East Asian type of inspired theme. So we're kind of trying to take that fantasy and put some Asians inspired theme into it, along with the fact that some of our characters are also just your typical Western fantasy as well. My character is East, so we're kind of split the two from East and West in our kind of story that we have going on. So mine is a bit more Eastern themed, which will be fun. So we're not going to get into sculpting today, but oh, hi everybody. But yeah, so we're not getting into sculpting today, but I also wanted to kind of cover that I'm going to be sculpting these guys not super differently, but a little differently than I usually do, because I'm going to be sculpting them to be able to look good at a very particular scale, right? Because D&D miniatures work on a very small scale. So I want to make sure that my character's outfit and clothing and stuff can kind of be seen, and when I sculpt it, you're not going to lose all that detail when you go for making something really tiny. So it's just some stuff that we get to keep in mind when we're sculpting something that small. But today we're just going to be drawing, so that'll be fine. But I'll go over with you guys kind of some ideas that I have when I'm sculpting something to a very particular scale, and this doesn't even this can be applied to stuff that's not even at super small scale. This is stuff that can be applied, it's stuff like Sideshow Collectibles, which is a lot bigger, but it's still very small in comparison to something that is, life size. And so you kind of have to handle all those things very differently. So to start out, I like to start with like a little bit of a silhouette, or just a block-in of a figure, So my figure is a female druid character, and for my reference that I have here, so I have a dinosaur because I'm a druid, so I have an animal companion, which I don't know if I'll draw today or not, but I also already printed my animal companion. It's just going to be hard to see on the camera, but I chose a Deinonychus for my animal companion. But I gave it some more Asian-inspired themes, so there's some stuff that's going to go on that kind of makes it feel more like a Chinese dragon, more than like just a dinosaur for my animal companion. But also we have, kind of like more of a typical like fantasy druid, but how do we take the typical fantasy druid and turn it into something that's a bit more Asian inspired, or maybe from Japan. I also did some stuff in some masks from China, which I thought were interesting as well. But the idea for my character is I want her to be pretty rural and more of like a survivalist type character. So, she doesn't come from nobility or anything like that. She's kind of been siloed and lives out in the woods and talks to animals and things like that. So, obviously Mononoke is like a huge inspiration for kind of like the character vibe that I want to go for. So yeah, we'll see what we can come up with. But it's fun to try to think of, your typical fantasy character. We'll be going through a lot of them. So we'll be going through, barbarians and rogues and all sorts of other things. But taking that and flipping it and turning it and adding, an extra element of something, so in this case, we're kind of going with the Japanese inspired. Oh, I have a shortcut here to flip my canvas. It's always important to flip your canvas a lot. You'll see if something's feeling off or feeling wrong. It's really easy to flip your canvas to get basically a fresh set of eyes onto something to see if it feels kind of off. So we're looking at the perspective here. And keeping the perspective really simple, we can make something that feels a little bit cooler later. For posing or for something, but just to get an idea of, costuming, I like to keep the poses, you can do 3 here, as simple as possible, just so you can see the whole outfit. And then when we're ready to commit to a certain design, that's when we can start doing some posing and coming up with some more interesting, character work. So I like to merge them down, and I'll lower the opacity a bit. And then what I can do is I can kind of just sketch over some ideas of what I have. Multiple people are asking how I started with my mood board. It starts from, a basic idea. So my basic idea is druid, right? And then I think about, I have, you can almost, before you even start with a mood board, you can do something where you just write some words down. I think I've done this before on the stream where I say, okay, I have a druid. It's, where it's like Asian inspired, specifically maybe something that's, more Japanese than most things. And then you ask yourself for D&D specifically, like, what is a druid? A druid has like a special language, they cast spells. They also, they can talk to animals, so they're more about nature. They also turn into animals, as you level them up. Right? So you can start kind of doing this number and kind of branching out. And so, what kind of spells do they do? They're like nature spells and stuff. They don't do like fireball or something. They do things that are like water spells, like hydraulic push or like entangled, right? So entangled is like, wood and stuff like that. And they can't wear any metal. If we're sticking to like the actual D&D lore, right? Druids can't wear metal, so their armor is either leather or wood, right? So you can get a spell that like turns it into a harder material and whatnot. So they're pretty like lightly padded, right? So it's like light armor. And these are the types of things that go on in my head as I think about who this character is and what we can put on this character, So we're not going to deck this person out like a paladin, right? Because that's not what the character is. So you can take a bunch of words like this and say, okay, what type of things can we grab from that? When I was thinking of Japan, that's also nature. I was thinking, well, what's the closest thing that's kind of, Japan doesn't really have like tribes the way some other places do, but it's more like rural farming or like more of like simple living off the land type stuff. So the closest inspiration to that is like, what do farmers feel like in like feudal Japan times? you know, what is somebody who's dealing with nature? And, you know, you can look at either real life reference, which is always good. Looking at real reference, I think, is the best place to start. But then also looking at things like, you know, Princess Mononoke is a really good example of a character that's inspired by like nature and things, right? But has kind of her own twist onto. You could argue that she's kind of like druidish, right? So that's kind of my thought process for all that stuff. And so then when I'm thinking about these things, I say, oh, what, you know, what inspirations and what things could I look up and find? And you can go really crazy. I mean, I only try to grab like a few images at first just to get some ideas. And then, because you don't want to get too strict with your ideation, you know, because I'm not trying to make something realistic. I'm still trying to make something fantastical. So I don't want to be super, super heavily inspired by just sticking to what's real. I want some leeway to be able to pick and choose some fun shapes. You know, so farmers have these, you know, cool little like hay type capes that we can maybe give our character. So this is kind of the places that I'll start with designing. Can't really go wrong with a kind of kimono vibe. Maybe like a really big belt or something. And I'm always trying to think of shape-wise, you know, you want to think of your interesting silhouettes and you want to think about interesting shape relationships. So like, for example, this shape in comparison to the belt, you don't want them to be the same volume. You know, you want maybe the belt to be really thin. So you have something medium, small, and then large would maybe be she has like a really large kind of like robe kind of thing. Or maybe it's a plated armor. Not plated, but it would be, maybe it's made of wood, right? Maybe it's like a wood plate thing. That's also split up into an interesting way. So a good rule again is not through try to break up your shapes not in half, but breaking up your shapes in more interesting proportions, right, is going to lead to more interesting contrast throughout your design. And then same thing with playing with, you know, playing with something small and then maybe large and then, you know, medium is going to play with these relationships in a much more interesting way, regardless of what you're, you know, designing. So keeping all that stuff in mind while I'm blocking out these sketches. Maybe she's got some rope that wraps around and she can hold a pack. So for my actual character, for my actual druid character, I picked some stats that I'm also a half elf as well, so that's why I've given her the pointy ears. But half elves also speak a bunch of crazy languages, so she has like, I think even though she's only level, you know, 1 because we're just starting, she's got like 6 different languages that she can speak. So what's fun about, you know, playing with these archetypes in something like D&D is, you know, the stats that you roll, the stats that you pick, or the attributes kind of allow you to have some limitations. She's got some stronger. Have some limitations for creating who your character is, right? So druids are the only ones that can speak druidic, right? And they're not allowed to teach it to any other druids. Or else they get banned. There's a bunch of interesting stuff that comes along with that, right? So, you know, if your character speaks a really secret language, it would make sense that maybe they speak a bunch of other different languages too. You know, so I like the idea of maybe my character being kind of like a linguist and trying to, since they're also very much in touch with like nature, my other idea is that maybe she's kind of more of like a Nico Robin in the sense that she is trying to explore, and unearth ancient histories or ancient languages of like, maybe ancient creatures or something that, no one speaks, what a Chinese dragon would speak, some sort of ancient dragon language, right? So maybe she's kind of like a paleontologist almost in that sense, or some sort of archaeologist who is trying to unlock the secret languages of ancient animals and stuff. At least that's kind of the idea that I have of right now. Give her some. It's very Legend of Zelda-y, isn't it? But it's okay. We're all right there. But yeah, so just picking, giving yourself some ideas. So that whole basis of, oh, maybe she's out looking for like ancient languages and she's a paleontologist or archaeologist type, all came from the fact that I picked a bunch of stats that have to do with language, So I think it's really fun to try to branch out. And even if you don't maybe play the game, that's totally fine. I think it's cool to find inspiration for characters, anywhere you go, especially because fantasy is so popular. I feel like she would definitely just be barefoot. That's my vibe. Especially just because, so you don't have to play the game, but looking up things like this for inspiration is always really fun, because you never know what you're gonna find out of it. Right, so trying to make her feel like she's kind of born in more natural, more simplistic clothing. Maybe some pouches and things to hold tools and whatnot. And there's kind of one. And then, we can maybe come up with some different hairstyles. You can try maybe more wild hairstyle, or that's a very angry. Woo! It's a very angry face. I don't think she's angry. I think she's pretty nice. Concentrating, no talking. Sorry. And then maybe she's got hello from Brazil. Hello. Trying to think maybe what kind of crazy hair. Hair's always an interesting one. Hair will always change the way your character, feels. Maybe she's got like a side. With maybe like kind of choppy, messy bangs or something. Flip it. I definitely always have to flip my canvas, especially when drawing. It's really important when you're drawing faces and things like that to kind of get. I always feel like I have a tendency to draw one eye a little higher than it should be. I don't know why. So I always have to just double check my canvas. This one's, I'll keep the short ears, but I kind of want to try one where she's got maybe longer ears or something like that. It could be interesting. Her head also feels a little too small. Made a little bigger. There you go, something like that. And then I'll do another one. So I definitely want some long ears. I want to try long ears. I think that could be cool. Even though she's half, I mean, I feel like visually you can play with what half elf could mean for your character, you know, because a lot of these visual traits have nothing to do with your physical stats. So, and maybe this time we'll definitely have to come up with what her face looks like, but you know, I have some masks here that I think are really interesting, and we're gonna go maybe with a more Mononoke vibe this time around. Kind of feels a little barn owl-y, but maybe we can give it some horns. The horns that I referenced are kind of like these horns that face forward, so maybe we can do some horns that kind of round and face forward to give it some sort of visual interest. Hi, Pat's from YouTube. If you guys have any questions about any of this, also feel free to ask, but it's a pretty chill day of just drawing. Maybe we'll go for the crazy hair vibe. And maybe for this one, I still like the hay idea, but because it's super common, but maybe we can try doing putting some asymmetry to it. So maybe it's something that is only on half of her shoulder. Because I like the idea that it's also kind of acts maybe as more of like a pauldron, you know, some sort of form of like protection. But her version of it is, you know, made of like really dense straw. Because I think it just adds a really visually interesting shape up top that gives the character some more breakup. I think I'm going to make this a little lower as well. Let's see if I can find something that gives, you know, there's like this crossbody rope. And maybe I can make this a little bigger. If you make things too small, it's going to be kind of hard to read, so make that rope shape a little bigger. And maybe it's wearing more of like a cropped thing. So now maybe her belly is more exposed. Gives her more of a wild vibe when you do stuff like that. Again, going for more of a Mononoke type feel. We'll still have to come up with like what a hairstyle for her would be, even though she's got a mask. At some point, her mask will have to come off. But maybe we can do, you know, we got this big rope tie, so maybe we can do something similar down here. We'll do sort of another big rope tie. So the key to making, you know, something feel, oh, we have a question. When designing character in 2D, we draw some cool forms that don't translate very well when we make 3D versions, like the thin legs in this character. Would you make them thicker in 3D or keep them as they are? Well, for 3D, if you're going to be 3D printing, obviously you can't make them super thin to where they break or something like that. But you can make super thin, you know, legs. I mean, Spider-Man has usually some pretty thin legs. And I'm all for pushing stylization regardless of the medium. It's more about it's less about the thinness of something, more that it is about capturing the shape that you want in all angles of a 3D object, right? So we can have thin legs. It's just about making those thin legs look interesting at all angles and not just, a front view or, a 3/4 view or something. Because it's way easier to, translate and kind of make these crazy shapes in 2D. And then trying to translate them to 3D can be a challenge. Give her, maybe she has like a kind of like a tattoo or something. But yeah, that definitely can be a challenge, and you want to be very aware of those choices that you're making. But also, if something's not working in 3D that you've done in 2D, but your final product is going to be a 3D thing, then change it to make it, help and make sense. It's kind of always going to be a back and forth as to like what works in 3D versus what works in 2D. But never be afraid of, pushing your 2D concept, afraid that it's not going to work in 3D. You don't want to limit yourself to that, because then you're not going to push your 3D stuff enough. So yeah, there's definitely a fine balance there. Neil tried some wood plates on the side now. Or maybe they'd be, I don't know, they could be made of like giant beetles or something. We could do something weird where it's like a hard material, but it's just not metal, So maybe it's more like this iridescent, like beetle wing or something. That could be kind of cool. And usually when I do different designs, I like to try to play with different ideas on each one. I like this pant idea, but let's see what happens if we just add, maybe she's got, let's see, some of our reference up here, has just like longer pants. So I'll play with making them maybe a lot longer, and not stop at the knee. And then maybe they can, instead of giving her I do think we need to add some sort of fluffy, fur somewhere. So maybe she still has that, but maybe it's more at the bottom, making this shape. And then maybe she has sort of like weird rope sandal things. Maybe still barefoot, really, but maybe she's got something there. Ignore my horrible feet drawing, but that's okay. Again, these are not supposed to be like the most amazing sketches or anything. It's just getting an idea down is the most important part. And there's something else we can do. If she's got like beetle wings, it's always good to repeat an idea. If you're going with something that feels more like it's got a bug wing or something like that, then it'd be good to kind of try to repeat that somewhere else. So maybe she's got a pauldron on, not a pauldron, a gauntlet on one side that's got something like that. That would be something similar. And we can always, to make sure that the viewer of your drawing knows that, this is going to be the same material as that, that obviously we just treat it the same. So if it's like an iridescent beetle wing or something like that, then we would just treat those areas the same, and then you can kind of come to the same conclusion that it's made of the same material. And so those are really easy visual cues. Kind of made I made one not as wrapped as the other. I'll fix that. I mean, I don't mind asymmetry, but that was not a purposeful asymmetry, so we will fix that. There we go. So now I have two. I kind of like sometimes for my third one to combine the ideas of both into one. And usually I end up liking that one the most because I usually have elements of the second idea that I like and elements of the first one that I'm like, ooh, this is more interesting. So, like, I think the big haystack is more interesting, but also I want to keep playing with the mask idea. So I might combine the two, and I think giving some layers so it feels like she's always in hiding, or it's like extra camouflage or extra protection from weather or something like that could be kind of interesting. I just think there's more going on in the first drawing that's interesting to me than the second. But I'm gonna kind of, you'll see how I kind of try to combine the two into something that's possibly more interesting. So we're gonna keep the hay idea, and we'll just start with some basic shapes. You don't want anything competing, but I definitely want, I like the idea of her being a little more protected from the weather. And we'll do some, we have plenty of time to do some more drawings of her face and mask and stuff, and how that all attaches and whatnot. I like the longer ears. I think the long ears are fun. I like these horns. I don't really have, we can try to play with different horn shapes later, or maybe different mask patterns. But right now it's more about getting the overall look first. And then once we go, okay, we like this idea for a mask, we can start doing variations on, you know, a mask or variations on different things. But it's just about blocking in all those elements first. And then figuring, and then breaking down and figuring out, you know, what's going to work and what isn't. Or what's going to change to make it work or make it feel cooler or more interesting. There's a lot of like crazy rope ties in one of these drawings. I think is kind of cool. You can play with something like that with this one too. And it's used to like kind of wrap around, seems like the hat, but maybe we can use it as something that holds her mask in place. Again, also don't bog yourself down with making complete sense of everything all the time. It's okay for it to be visually interesting. And you can figure out the logistics of how something works, you know, later if you need to. But I think it's more important for something to look visually interesting than it is for it to look logical, or for it to, like, how would it work in the real world? It's an important question, but I think too many people get carried away with that. I always like using the example of, if you've seen the latest Dune movie, you know, there's tons of really cool spaceships in that film that they don't really make a lot of sense. I mean, there's one that's like a giant ball with these like really tiny little legs. And you're like, oh yeah, the legs would probably crush underneath the weight of blah, 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 you know? And if you nitpick stuff like that, you're not going to enjoy making fantasy, right? The idea is that it's fake. It's fantasy. It's fiction. It's, you know, so really embrace just like what can look cool, or what looks cool to you. And don't worry about comments of people being like, it wouldn't fly if did this thing, or it wouldn't attach, or the mask would fall off all the time, or blah, 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 blah. It's okay to give yourself certain limitations, but don't be married to them to where it's not fun to design something. You know? Make it fun first, and then figure out how it possibly could work later. You know? I think I like the idea of the shorter kimono, but I kind of want to, I do want to make a little bit more sense of it, in the sense that I want it to feel like she's put it together. So maybe there's like some little fangs, like some sort of like hook that keeps it attached. You know, and maybe she's ripped it off of something. So maybe maybe that area is a little torn because she's taken it from, you know, something else. That would make more sense to me. I like I don't mind the big bow type shape, but I think we can do something where maybe it hangs at a slant, because I like these slanted ones in the first one. So maybe we can have, you know, her sash, and then maybe we can have a big rope that goes across like this. And maybe it's kind of tied out the side, so it's not in the middle, it's a little bit more asymmetrical. Like a big, cool, thick rope or something. And then maybe we can still have that kind of plating that goes down. Yeah, over designing can be dangerous, right? Yeah, Final Fantasy is actually a really good example of a world that, when you try to break down the logic of it, it doesn't really make it. Like, Cloud fights people with guns with giant swords, right? It kind of doesn't make any sense. Like, why does he have a sword, but why do these people have guns? And then there's like special magic. Like, there's magic and guns and tech, and they combine so many different things to make, you know, that Final Fantasy world. And it's awesome. It's super fun, right? So yeah, if you over design something too much, it can be kind of detrimental to your creativity and to coming up with something like really original and interesting. Because if you stick yourself too much into realism and ground yourself too much, then you're only going to make something that would actually exist, and that's kind of boring. At least in my opinion, I think it's kind of boring. I think it's far more interesting to give yourself some more leeway and design something that's just more unique and more interesting, even if like it doesn't technically make the most realistic sense. Who cares, right? I like the baggy pants that go to like the knee, and I'm gonna make it fluffy. And now the biggest thing is I don't want, it just needs to be a little thinner. Maybe it's more like a thin cloth thing. It goes a little longer than that. Again, just trying to find something that's more visually, you can visually see like the pieces broken up onto it. And then maybe she's still got some little plating on the side. Something kind of like that. Yeah, with the ripped kimono, it's starting to feel a bit more like she's tribal. Maybe we can give her some like patchwork or something. It could even be interesting if maybe underneath she's like put together two pants that she's found, so one side is, you know, a different color than the other. That could be kind of fun. And she's got like a bunch of stitching up in between, or something. I don't like this tangent right here. I'm gonna make sure that that rope feels like it's overlapping. And then for my sketching, I'm a big fan of, you know, putting in some nice line weights to give contrast to what's in front and what's behind, and, you know, some occlusion. Fox Spray, yo, how we doing? We doing good. Doing real good. Doing just fine. Designing our druid character. Yeah, if you guys have ideas, or if you guys have played D&D and played like a druid character, you know, what are your inspirations, or what do you find fun or interesting about, you know, a character? Or maybe your favorite class, you know? I haven't played all that much of D&D, so I've never played a druid before, so I'm actually pretty excited. I'm going to try to turn into as many dinosaurs as possible. That's my goal. Because it's fun. Maybe we got some extra little ties. For my character, my character's weapon, I think I have a scythe right now, but dude, the moment I can turn into a dinosaur, who's using weapons at this point, right? Also gonna make my animal companion go destroy everything. It's gonna be awesome. Gave her some, you know, like earring type things. I think that could be fun. I like the idea of giving her some simple like tattoo designs or something that go across. Maybe she's got another one on the other side of her legs or something. Maybe one leg is more bound and bandaged. Add some asymmetry to the idea. And there you go. So that's pretty fun. But you can see how I kind of combine the two ideas, and I think I came up with something that's a bit more interesting than one or the other. Doesn't always happen, but I think it's good to take, you know, ideas that you like from one concept to the next, and then, you know, combine the two and see if you find something that's more interesting or something that works a little better to your advantage. I think I could probably hide. Yeah, that now. So now I can select this one, copy it and paste it. Oh, someone's being they haven't played D&D at all, but started playing something. I'm gonna be a half elf. Yeah, I'm a half elf too. Seems to be like a lot of advantages to being. Well, I liked the idea of being a druid and a half elf because you also learn. I think by default you get the common language, and then you get druidic as a language, and then you also get elven, and then because of some other stats that I chose, I get to pick like 3 other languages. So I think I speak one is called Terra, which I think speaks to like trees and plants and like common animals. I'm trying to remember the other ones that I picked. I can't exactly remember. There's so much to remember. But yeah, it's super fun. But yeah, so now I think we have a character that feels, you know, kind of connected to nature, feels like a survivor in the, you know, forest and things. So it's got those elements of what maybe a druid could be, but again, we took, at least for my the campaign that I'm doing, it's more, you can either choose to be like your typical fantasy character from the West, or in our version, our characters from the East are more, you know, Japanese or Asian inspired characters. And so I don't say no to anything that's feudal Japan because it's awesome and my favorite thing to design. It's super fun. And so I couldn't say no to a druid that's kind of based in that world. So it sounded really fun. And there we go. So we can probably add some colors and stuff to her as well. Can do some poses as well. Because before picking a pose, I usually do this. I mean, for the stream, I haven't always done it. Because sometimes on the stream, I'll just start coming up with a pose on the fly. But for posing, you know, a character, it's important to gather, you know, get like a feeling that she's more drawable. She wouldn't stand like a samurai, right? Like a samurai is going to stand very upright and be very noble looking and honorable and all these different things. So a pose tells a lot about like how a character fights and how they interact with the world, right? So I just gonna combine those 2 layers. So for her, you know, maybe she has kind of like a weirder stance. So, you know, maybe she's a bit more hunched over when she fights. There's something about her that needs to feel, you know, more like animalistic. So maybe her knees kind of buckle in a bit more. You can do really simple sketches like this just to get an idea of, you know, maybe her horns would, you know, do something like that. So she feels a lot more, you know, when she's down and moving around in the woods, she should feel more like an animal, more than she feels like a human. Right? Which makes more sense for why she would have the thing on her back and stuff like that. And she's got a little scary knife. It's not such a little knife if I draw it that big, but you know, it could be interesting. Now I'm thinking about it. She could have this another claw thing in the back that when she moves around, it almost acts like a tail, but it's really just like a piece of cloth. Right? So then if we add something like that, her movement feels, you know, maybe now her silhouette's going to feel like at a glance far more like an animal if we add something like that as well. You know, and she's got her long ears and stuff, so she's really easily blending in with her environment there. You know, these don't have to be like super finished sketches. These just have to, I like getting these sketches down because again, it gives you more and more ideas to play with as to like who this character is and how they move. And it helps a lot to put your characters in these positions because, you know, if they're not feeling like the character that you initially created, then, you know, something in their design's probably wrong. And you got to go back and figure out like, okay, how can I convey and visually communicate this idea more. So, you know, she should feel very... Her story should kind of tell itself, right? That's what character design and all that stuff is kind of really based in. Do one where she's maybe hunched over onto a ledge or something. Yeah, like Batman. Right, but if you run into her in the middle of the night, that does not look like a human. And again, if we have that long, cool paper, or like piece of cloth or whatever, that arm's really long, but I like the idea of her arm kind of resting. And you could push her hands and stuff more to feel more like animalistic. There's nothing wrong with that. Again, giving her something that feels visually different, that really tells your story of who your character is important. Because I'm not going to be able to sit there, you know, I should be able to kind of put her figure down or, you know, show you this drawing, and you should kind of get some sort of idea of who they are. You know, does this character look like they get along with a lot of people? You know, do they interact with a lot of people? Or do they look more wild and like they, you know, survive out in the wilderness or whatever it is? You want to make sure that at a glance, you know, your idea is being communicated correctly, right? Because I'm not going to be there to be like, oh, this is everything about my character, right? You know, when you walk into a movie or, you know, you read a manga or whatever it is, however their look, or, you know, something like if you look at League of Legends or whatever it is, you should be able to look at that character and get some sort of idea of who they are. You don't need every single little detail, but, you know, if they're a gladiator or a warrior or a paladin, or, you know, they're a little kid with a bear friend or whatever it may be, it should be pretty easy to be able to tell and differentiate all those characters. She's hanging out on like a tree limb or something. Obviously, your environment's going to tell a lot too about where they are and who they are. You wouldn't be probably catching a paladin hanging up on the trees, right? So. I'll draw one her running with her animal companion. And I say that mainly because I just want to draw a dinosaur. But let's do it. Oh, it'd be interesting if... I mean, I might just have her be running, but what if she like ran? Like if she ran different, like maybe she kind of runs. Doesn't seem like she would be able to run really fast, so it seems kind of impractical. But she like ran on kind of like all fours. It was like kind of wild in that sense. It could be kind of interesting. You know, like the way Tarzan would run. I don't think Tarzan goes on a full out sprint most of the time. I don't think he actually ever really does that. He's like constantly just swinging from trees if he wants to go fast, right? So I don't know. Could be interesting. Oh, there's also I don't know if you guys remember this, but in Atlantis, what's her name? When she like runs away from Milo, and that's how they find and discover Atlantis. I don't know if any of you guys will remember this scene, but she like climbs on rocks and she's like super fast and she looks like a creature climbing on all the walls and stuff. I kind of picture that. She almost scurries. Like, it's really cool. They animated that super well, actually, now that I think about it. I'm going to look that up as some reference. Her name's like, it's just like Key. Like, it's like a K or something. Maybe some of you guys will remember in the chat if you guys remember it. But, yeah, I really like the way they kind of portray her in that. I think it's super cool. Because she feels so different from them, right? I think that's the point. She's supposed to feel more unknown, you know, and they get that point across that by the fact that they move super different than like Milo. And Milo's like struggling over rocks trying to catch up with her, and she makes it look super easy. So yeah, I think something like that could be really cool. Very flowy. Also give direction to her little straw tie. The little thing would come off from that. And then the other one would also, from the front, come off from that. The rope would be flying backwards, along with their little armor pieces. I had someone message me the other day saying that they sit and do homework while listening to the stream, and that made me very happy. So I hope all you guys are sitting here, and I like to think that you guys are all sitting here and also drawing along, and you know, drawing your characters, or hopefully finding some ideas. I also wanted to get an idea of if me drawing every week is super helpful for you guys, and if you really enjoy the drawing, or if you enjoy watching the sculpting process more. It's really helpful for me to know which one you guys enjoy, because then maybe I can spend more time doing drawing, or spend more time doing, I mean, I spend a lot of time doing sculpting, but if you guys are really enjoying watching the drawing process, then, you know, I can always turn that into maybe more episodes. If this type of stuff is more helpful for character creation or whatever it may be. Cool. Do I have this all in one? Yeah, that's fine. Let me make room for our raptor. And I'll put that on a layer just so I can have on something else. And just draw straight through. And if it gets a little too busy, once you have an idea of where, you know, your character is, you can always just turn off that layer and, you know, sculpt this, or not sculpt this, draw this separately. So I already knew what my, you know, again, like I said, the animal companion for the Eastern themed, we're gonna have more vibes of you know, Chinese dragon, and so they'll have fur long stuff, which is kind of fun. Give them the cool little, I don't know what you would call that, little tendril that they put on there. And I'm also looking at what's more interesting. Also, I turned her back on so I could see if it's more interesting to have the foot like that than have this one stretch out, so they're kind of matching. But I can also move this a little more forward, so that way it doesn't feel like it's, you know, and I think it might be more interesting to have his like back, because then they're not sharing the same pose or the exact same pose. I'll turn her off again. Hopefully by the time you guys are watching the stream, you realize that I love dinosaurs, so any reason to draw a dinosaur, I'm gonna take advantage. Full advantage of dinosaur drawings at all times. I think his arm needs to actually, maybe it can come back with that. Does that work? Or do we want it maybe super curled up? If you guys are looking for some good dinosaur artists, David Krentz is a really good one. I think he actually, I don't know if it's still on there, but I think Gnomon used to have a Gnomon DVD or a Gnomon online one that where he went and talked about like dinosaur anatomy. I don't know if it's still on there, but man, I watched that thing so many times. It's like one of my favorite videos about learning dinosaur anatomy specifically. Super good. But David Krentz is an awesome paleontological artist, whatever you want to call that. If you can find it, Tara Whitlatch also has some really good dinosaur drawings as well. Unfortunately, me being in LA, I get to go to the Naturalist Museum, which has a wonderful collection of dinosaurs. Therapist, T-Rex Samurai isn't real, he can't hurt you. I love the idea of a T-Rex Samurai. That's happening. I'm gonna talk to my DM, see if he's like, hey man, can we make, because that sounds so fun to sculpt. Because I'm gonna try to not just sculpt everybody's characters, but I want to sculpt everybody's all the enemies and stuff too. I don't know if you guys can see this or not because my thing's so tiny, but this is the, whoop, there we go. You can see the little guy. So that's about how big they're gonna be. So this is the raptor that I'm drawing now. So it's super fun. Very fun to 3D print things. It gets very addicting. So be careful when you invest. There we go. Cool. So then, now that I have the drawing, now I can erase away where they overlap. You can also mask it if you're afraid to erase away stuff. But I didn't really care. It's just a sketch, so it's fine. But it's also one of those things where you're like, oh man, are they too big or too small or whatever? But if, oops. I think he's a little too big, but I can just make her bigger. I think I'd rather do that. That feels a bit more accurate. So that's fun. It's crazy to imagine that the animal most close to the T-Rex alive today is the chicken. Yeah, it's pretty crazy, right? It's like all birds. I mean, really like a cassowary or something is pretty scary. You know, if you look at like a cassowary's talons and stuff, I mean, that's basically a living dinosaur, you know. Crocodiles are similar. They're kind of like a living dino, but they're more lizard than dinosaurs used to be. But yeah, it's really interesting to think about like a T-Rex and picturing it walking around like a chicken. So it's pretty fun. So now we got some cool character sketches, and then I'll do one of her unmasked. I'll just do like kind of like a bust close-up shot thing maybe over here. I can move. I could also merge down the raptor with the action sketches. So I can move this over a little bit just to give myself some more room and make it maybe more. I could also maybe flip it. Do I like it flipped? I like to try to come up with something that compositionally also feels cool, you know, so that way they're all not facing the same direction. I can kind of move this in. I kind of like it going the other way, but it's fine. I won't bother it right now. I like to find an interesting composition usually for like the action poses and sketches and stuff. You're gonna have a, you know, picture of your character and then have some poses of them doing stuff. It's always really helpful. Yeah, one of my favorite dinosaurs is like the Carnotaur, or like the Allosaurus, and their limbs are so tiny. Their front limbs are so small, and I'm like, how and why? Why are they so small? It's so interesting to me, and I think scientists still don't really know why. You can't really break down like what is the benefit of having really tiny arms, you know. Try to figure out where. I always like to also for, you know, if you're doing like character expressions and stuff, try to add the shoulders if you can. It'll just help you figure out like the pose a lot better, and it gives a lot more character than just drawing like just a floating face. Can add her mask that kind of sits on top. Trying to get that perspective right can be tricky. Big ropes that maybe tie this all together. And like I said, on our other little drawing, we kind of had ropes coming down and maybe they kind of wrap around her neck or do something interesting. But I saw that in the reference. There's like tons of ropes wrapping around and attaching that hat to the character. So and what's cool about her horn shapes is even if her mask is up, they'll stick up. So it'll still keep like a kind of fun, interesting silhouette, because when the mask is down, they maybe face a little bit more, more forward. So when you pull them up, they should still face kind of upwards. So her silhouette should still be pretty threatening, even with the mask up. Maybe she's got kind of long, messy hair. The chin's starting to look a little too masculine, so we can kind of round that face out. You can also make the eyebrows have a lot to do with it. When you thin out the eyebrows a lot, they'll start to look a bit more feminine as well. And then obviously when you add the eyelashes, they have only small problems with carpals. Little hands. Still talking about the Allosaurus. I guess they just don't need them for what they were doing for hunting and all that stuff, I mean, birds, they fly around and stuff, so they don't need, that's the use of their forearms, because their hands turn into, they have hands, it's the same bone structure. Birds have the same exact bone structure as we do. It's just that there's plumage attached to it that helps them, fly and all that stuff. This is probably going to be a time to flip the canvas. We're at here. Oh, it's not as bad as I thought it was going to be. Kind of like choppy hair that goes up and over front. She's a little bit too round of a face. I'm going to try to make her feel a little stronger in the chin. Maybe a little too rounded. And we're still going to have all the fur coming down. All those ropes. Also, a thinner neck will also make something feel, more feminine versus masculine. Just trying to make sure, like, you line up all those perspective points, right? For head turning. Always good, like, if you're not sure about your perspective, drawing straight lines through, to make sure that those vanishing points are matching. This is kind of going this way. Her eyes are kind of going here, going there. So you can see that those are vanishing eventually into something. Doesn't have to be perfect, but again, it's a good way to make sure that your drawing feels accurate and has volume and the correct depth and all that stuff. And then splaying these out in a way that makes it feel like they're rounding around her back. And you can break up the surface a bit more. This is behind the shadow. This is where her kimono would be. Something like that. Those little fangs, right? They're attached to her kimono. Doesn't have to be the whole, bust. We can kind of leave that kind of disappearing. And that should really feel like it's rounding around like this. This whole hay shape, right, is really just like another big cylinder and cone, and then her, neck sticks through there, right? And it's kind of a piece that looks like that and attaches, and then it splays out this way. So as long as you're drawing, think of it as a simple cylinder first. And then, instead of this, if you draw through, that would be like the back of it goes down, right? So it's actually really good too, if you're struggling with, a certain shape or something that you're finding, breaking it down and making sure that you understand its form from all angles. You can draw something like this first to try to break down like what shape that really is. And you're like, oh, it's really like a cylinder that kind of does this thing, and then attaches. Right? Everything is all about, when it comes to drawing stuff that looks complicated, it's really just about breaking it down to its simplest forms. That's why I love studying 2D animation, because 2D animation is so good at that. They take things that are really complex, and find a way to be able to draw it over and over and over again. And make it move. And the way you do that is by breaking it down into its simplest form, and then being able to break it down and draw it over and over again isn't so hard, because you're really just like, oh, it's just a cylinder. We've drawn cylinders tons of times, and it's just a slightly more complicated cylinder. That's really all it is. So breaking your shapes down that way can be really helpful. I'm just adding some fun shadow shapes. Gives the character some more depth. Especially if there's this mask that goes on top, then we can kind of line out where that shadow shape of the mask would fall. And kind of mask and sketch that in. It's kind of like a inking phase almost. That just gives your character sketches a bit more life. That's why I always laugh at people on Instagram or something that are posting like just this quick sketch, but it's like really in depth, because you can see I've been working on this sketch for, I don't know, 10 minutes now, right? Like a simple sketch that is very sketchy, still takes a lot of time to kind of nail down correctly and make it feel correct. Greetings from Spain from Move Animation Studio. I'm a designer, and it's beautiful to be able to create worlds, original and unique characters. I agree. I don't know what people who don't create stuff do. I don't know what they do with their time. I have no idea. I love being able to, draw from the imagination in the sense that we're coming up with our own ideas, gather your reference, of course, but um, yeah, being able to create characters that people can connect to and react to and feel is what it's all about. It's so fun to be able to come up with, crazy, wild, wacky ideas and try to get them to come to life. Maybe add some darkness there so it looks like there's a hole where she would see out of. Yeah, and doing a bust like this gives you a good idea of like who your character is and stuff as well. It's very helpful. Cool. And now you can see we have, we came up with the design and then, did some action poses, come up with something. I really like, I think that one's a lot of fun for maybe the pose. I'm not really sure yet. Because again, they're so small that, the crouching one's really cool, but if you crouch your character over, on like a branch or a stump or something, then you're kind of you're making your character really small on something that's already going to be really small. So you're like cutting your character's height in half, which means visually, like on the print, it's just not going to be as the silhouette's just not going to be as interesting at that scale. So having something where you can really see the full character a bit more is more interesting. So I think for sculpting's sake, we'll probably do something like that. I think that'll be cool. But now we can try to block in maybe some color on our character on this one. Yeah, so I'll just create a new layer. I'll make my brush a lot bigger. I like to just fill in some sort of color first onto the whole thing. And this will be it's just a sketch. I'm not going to go in and do fancy line work or anything this time around. We did that last time with the orangutan, so I'm just going to keep this like very just idea based. And my line work's clean enough to where I can do this and it's not, it's not so sketchy where I don't know what I'm doing or what shapes are there. It's a clean enough sketch to block in and get some idea for colors. So just something like that. Don't be too, picky about, your line work. And the moment I was not picky about line work, I actually really enjoyed my line work. I used to go really crazy where I would like zoom in and like try to be all clean and whatever. Which it only happens when you do digital, which is why I implore you to always practice doing traditional drawing and sketching and then really try not to zoom into your canvas. I think this whole time I've been kind of drawing at this, size. I didn't try to zoom into my character's face and was like really trying to hone in on anything. Because you can't do that with paper, right? If I'm drawing a character at that size on a piece of paper, I don't get to zoom in and come up with detail. So really try hard not to do that when you're sketching on the computer. It makes your process take 10 times as long. Especially when it comes to inking. When I was trying to ink originally, I used to zoom in real far and ink that stuff. I still zoom in a little bit. Ink, I think I did that on the orangutan, but it's important to not do that as much as possible. Because also your drawing is going to be seen from, you know, here. So if you zoom in and try to make all these like crazy little line work details that in the end you don't see, doesn't really matter. So, all right, so now I have my layer. Oh, someone says for the creativity, most people just costume. That's still creative. I mean, people that like don't do anything creative. That's still super creative to me. You got to do something creative. No matter what it is, I think it's important for the human soul and for people, you know, to have that fun hobby or to do something that's, you know, creative or just for you. You know, it doesn't have to be something that you make an occupation out of. So the easiest one to start with is like the hay. So I want to just first get all the colors in, right? Because, you know, I've talked about this before. You can't judge other colors based on other colors if you don't have the entire color context in there. So it's really important to make sure that we're getting just a basic idea first of all the colors before going in saying, oh, this needs to be darker, this needs to be, you know, lighter, or blah, or maybe a totally different color. I just want to get in all the basic stuff first. Druids are usually green, so, you know, we can still play with that. I think it's important, you know, there's always like breaking rules, right? So if we say, oh, druids are normally nature and green, you're like, oh, but what if, you know, they're, I don't know, completely like purple or super bright yellow or something. That's kind of a hard one, at least for me personally, to convince, like, why would you change the color? Because if they're going to be, you know, camouflage and like green goes with nature and like there's a very specific reason why druids are usually green. So I think it's one of those things where, as a rule, that one's kind of a hard one to find a reason to break it. Just because it makes more sense practically with like their outfit and where they're getting their materials from, and things like that. So I think it's one of those things where you have to have a really good reason as to why you would probably change that color at all. Should probably be fairly tan. Tannish. She's out in the sun a decent amount. And then maybe, where's the mask? I'll keep the mask separate, but I want, you know, the red to also be on maybe somewhere else. Again, especially, I mean, I'll probably be painting some of these people. You know, I like to paint the miniatures. I don't know if I'll paint the tiny ones, but if I print this at a larger scale and paint it, it's also important to keep, you know, don't go crazy with colors. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to go crazy with colors. Keep the palette, you know, to a minimum most of the time. And that's pretty good rule of thumb for just most things in general, especially if you're doing like animation and stuff like that as well. You want to keep those color palettes to pretty simple colors, since we're going to be painting it all the time. And it's just going to feel more coherent. I'm going to make this, see, you make it feel a little bit more olive. Maybe a little darker. Play with saturation, right? And now I think I could add. Maybe her pants are a little darker, or maybe they're now like a little more brown. We said that we maybe liked the idea of her pants being like half colors. But maybe not something that's a similar color to the top, right? But also if we're thinking about, you know, if I'm painting this later, maybe the half pant color doesn't make sense. Maybe we'll just keep patchwork, right? But I might play with it later. I still kind of like the idea. And playing with, like, I think different kinds of browns will be interesting. So, you know, if she's got like the wood plating, maybe it's more of like a cherry tree oak type. So I'm keeping her palette to very neutral browns and greens, and then that color accent is really going to be that just that red that pops out. And then maybe she's got really dark rope that ties all that stuff together. Bring that up more. You know, and what I like about keeping all these on separate layers is if I don't like that cherry color, I can just go in and darken it, and I'm like, oh yeah, that looks a lot better. Maybe I can add more saturation or less saturation. You actually don't need a lot of value change, you know, to make something feel a little different. Find that fluffiness color and add that to the bottom here. Adam, today is yellow day. Love it. Ooh, yellow day. Yes. Oh, you're talking about my shirt. Yes, it is yellow. Yellow day. I have 2 long sleeve yellow shirts that I love. That was a pretty good color. It's a good color. I think I also want to add some red there. I didn't add it. Oops. There we go. Try to find where the red is again. There it is. Maybe add some red there. And then maybe she's got some green-ish earrings or something. We can play with, you know, how bright green those are. Could be a slight blue color accent or something as well. That wouldn't be horrible. Yeah, so Moves Animation Studio is saying sorry, I'm catching up on all the things. It's saying many models of different colors are taken out and it's presented as a color chart to the production managers. And yeah, that's usually pretty true. It's just important to have basically something simplified that can be repeated again and again and again, right? And if you make something really complicated, you know, not that it can't be complicated, it can be, but if you make something a little too complicated to continually repeat again and again, you know, you're going to have inconsistencies throughout your design, which makes it problematic for when you're doing animations and things like that. So it's important to, sometimes if you feel like you need another color, just try keeping it a color that you already have first and see if it's something that you really, really need, you know. And then if you feel like you really need that extra color value, then, you know, by all means, you can do it, but try to keep it simple first and then make it complicated. You know, if it works with simplicity first, why try to make it any more complicated than that? So there's the mask. I'm gonna add again the same color to the mask as well, and you can see, like, even though it's the same color as the fur, it doesn't really matter because it just adds good breakup to the mask. Now it's good to play with, because her colors are so neutral, it's important to maybe play with some saturation and contrast and stuff. So maybe the hay is a bit brighter. And maybe instead of, you can always play with it. I usually like the strip to be a bit brighter, but maybe it can be a little darker. See what happens if we make it darker. Maybe just a little bit darker, right? Maybe not do crazy amount of contrast. Usually less is more with this stuff. Logan Ben on Twitch is asking, how many years of practice have you done before being able to do this character sheet so quickly? I've been sketching and drawing a long time. I've been drawing ever since I've been taking it seriously ever since I was in high school. And I've always loved drawing, and I really actually mainly drew like animals and like creature design stuff first, before getting into, you know, just character stuff. So yeah, I mean, I've been out of high school for like 10 plus years now. So with practice, you can get quick at it. But yeah, this definitely does not come overnight for sure. I think a lot of people just kind of expect that stuff to come overnight, and I'm gonna give her a tattoo. But yeah, in reality, it doesn't. It takes lots of practice. It takes lots of drawing. You know, if you want to get quicker at these types of studies, a lot of it also is just letting go of something looking bad. You know, it's not about the drawing looking good yet. It's really just more about conveying an idea. I still feel like I have tons to learn when it comes to practicing drawing and continuing to get good at drawing. You know, there's some amazing artists out there that are so inspiring to keep up that work and stuff. So, you know, it's a lifelong journey at the end of the day. It really is. But don't let that bring you down. You should, if anything, that should make you excited, because it means you constantly get to be learning. You constantly get to be studying and learning something new, and means this occupation never gets boring, you know, as long as you allow it to not get boring and constantly challenge yourself, you know. So I think that's a big one for me. Just adding some shadows and stuff now, because it's fun and we have some time. And again, I'm not doing anything super accurate. I just want this idea to come across. And adding some shadows just kind of helps, you know, convey some depth and some idea of where these things lie. But, you know, someone mentioned studying anatomy, you know, doing figure drawing. That's quick figure drawing stuff. Going to cafes. I go to cafes and study from life all the time. I bring a sketchbook wherever I go. You know, I went to watch my little brother play baseball over the weekend, and I brought a sketchbook and I drew baseball players. You know, I don't really intend to ever draw a character about baseball, but the gesture and the movements and all that stuff can help you later on. You know, swinging a bat versus swinging like a hammer You know, there's a lot to take away from that if you find the good enough reference for it, right? I don't find a lot of people swinging hammers, but hey, I know how to people swing a bat, you know, and I've done some studies of that, so that might help. So it's about being creative with your ideas, and then yeah, just studying perspective, and it's all about like, you know, studying those fundamentals. That in the end will help you. Oops. Okay. Tone down that shadow. You don't want it to compete with your sketch. You kind of got to pick line work or shadow. You got to pick like kind of one or the other. So, you know, let it be a more subtle thing on something like a sketch. Just helps bring out a little bit of extra depth. That's really all it does. And then as like a final touch to our drawing, we can just go back with our normal pen and add some, just some like shadow stuff. Just make these shadows more apparent. And also, it's not, you know, drawing stuff like this quickly isn't also about just drawing, you know, characters and anatomy. Like, the anatomy is important, but I'm also covering the anatomy with tons of different objects. So, you know, referencing like how does rope turn, or, you know, what I was explaining about the thing that she's wearing, you know, and breaking down props and clothing and stuff is just as helpful with making something feel real, making something feel like it's sitting on top of the anatomy that you drew as well, right? So that's also equally as important. Is I think what's his name? Will Heston? I don't remember. I follow a guy on Instagram who does tons of just awesome life drawing sketches stuff, and he says someone asked him once, like, how do you choose what you know, draw next? Because he draws like just really random stuff. Like he'll draw a baby stroller, and then he'll draw a car, and then he'll draw a house, and you know, he's just constantly drawing what's around him. You know, so people ask like, oh, why, you know, why do you do that, or like, how do you pick what you draw? And he said something really cool that always stuck with me. Is he said that, you know, everything you run into deserves to be drawn. You know, everything has its own signature and has its own beauty that would make it worth drawing. And I always loved that. I always thought that was so cool. So it's kind of about finding the beauty in the simplest of things, right? And then being able to take that knowledge and bring it somewhere else is really cool. So, you know, everything's worth drawing, so draw it. I think those colors are pretty good. Feels pretty nomadic, you know. And then if we wanted to, we can add color to our sketches as well. So, because we have some time. So to do that, because they're just really quick sketches, I'll just do it all on one layer. Because it doesn't have to be clean or anything. It's just, you know, giving the color breakup idea. Can be like really fast. Oh, Move Animation says I'm in the right place to go for Epic Games to draw the new Fortnite characters. If I liked Fortnite, maybe I would, but Fortnite could be fun. I mean, they have so many characters that they draw, but they're usually characters that aren't super original anymore. You know, they're adding like Star Wars characters and things. Like making up my own stuff. I would totally go work for or just do it on the side, do some, you know, make some miniatures like I've been doing for personal projects, just come up with a bunch of cool miniature stuff. Because that's just purely like you just sculpt it and then prep it for printing, and oh man, it's just so much fun. So again, just blocking out really quickly. I always debate sometimes. I'm like, oh, should I color these sketches in? They always look, I'm like, they look fine, like they're good. But then once I put the color on them, I'm like, yeah, they're cooler. Because then you get to see like the breakup. And they kind of just pop a lot more from the page, even if they're really simply colored. So I always try to remind myself to do it. Color adds just so much cool life to things. Even if you do it very quickly and simply. So we can do something like that, and then I'll just lock it, the transparency, and then I'll just color pick and do them all at once. And just kind of start from what would be below everything. You know, start with like the bottom layers basically. But it does not have to be perfect. Really honing in and reminding you, does not need to be perfect. You can see they start to kind of come to life pretty quickly, which is really cool. Especially once I add the red to it, because that's where like the most interesting color breakup comes from, is from all the red that you get. Especially obviously her face. You can even just kind of color, be like, yeah, on her foot, there's a thing. And then adding the little white to her face helps break up the horns and the face a lot. Just gives it some cool character. Yeah, movie animation is saying he says it because it's supposed to put the most designs on the platform. It is true. There's tons of designs that are coming out of Fortnite for sure. It's just fun for everybody that gets to play it. My goal eventually is probably go for some League of Legends. I'm a big fan of Riot's designs. I love their stuff. They just get to be so creative with what they do. And then I'll do, I think I have time to just color our character here as well. So I'll just do the outline. Maybe one day I'll work for Riot. Who knows? I'm pretty happy with where I'm at right now, and I love teaching at Gnomon. I love doing the stream, and I have plenty of personal projects that I work on, so I don't really have a lot of complaints with the stuff that I do. Actually, I'm gonna color your shirt first. You can see these are just really fast. These are not, final anythings. But I feel like just color just helps so much to convey who your character is. That's also where you're going to be seeing it in the end, is you're going to be seeing it as a colored thing. So it helps just to pop out that character more. I'm just color picking from, what I had before. Put the little details on the face. And then I think I'll just make her hair pretty dark. So it really just blocks in her face. And then, I don't know, maybe she has like brighter-ish eyes. And for a thing like this, I always like to kind of take something and kind of like lightly paint in some like cheeks or some coloration. On the, she's masked on all the other ones, but it just gives her face a little bit more life and color. And there we go. I didn't get to paint the raptor, but that's okay. I know the colors. So there you have it. Now we have our little druid character, and again, next week we're going to take this design and we'll sculpt it out. And again, we're going to be sculpting it for prepping it for 3D printing, is the idea. So we'll go over the techniques and stuff that I use just to make that process a lot easier, and especially when we're thinking about the scale of the character and things like that. So, but we're probably just going to be blocking in and sculpting all the basic shapes next week. So if you want to see that, join me back here on Archetype on Tuesdays, 4 to 6. I'm always around most of the time. And so, yeah, with that, thank you guys for joining me, and I will catch you guys next time. All right, bye.